This is the third video. Video number one, just a brief telling what the purpose of this series is. Video number two, how and when I was adopted. This video, I wanted to talk about my experience with knowing that I was adopted from such a young age. And I also hope that people who have tuned in and who are watching will be interactive with me with the videos, ask questions. It may help open up more experiences that I can share that I may not necessarily be thinking about. So feel free, okay? Feel free to ask questions. This video, again, like I said, is intended to talk about my experience with knowing at such a young age that I was adopted. So I actually knew from about the age of 5 or 6 that I was adopted. And I honestly don't know how me finding out actually came about. I just remember always knowing that I was different from my family because I am biracial and I was raised in a black family. Now, don't get me wrong, I have family members that are actually, most of them are in Louisiana, who I actually look like I could probably belong in that part of the family. But the family that I was around most of the time, I definitely look very different than them. And so I don't know if that's how it ended up coming about that I was told that I was adopted, but I've known since I was about 5 or 6. And one of the things that I experienced with this knowledge and awareness is I kind of used it to justify the mistreatment that I would receive from my family. I learned at a really young age to rationalize the things that were happening to me, and it wasn't until really a few years ago that I realized, like, hey, you can't rationalize your feelings all the time. But I learned that at a young age, and that was one of the first ways that I remember, like, actually rationalizing the things that was happening to me. Or excusing the things that was happening to me because I was adopted. It's something I think that is pretty common with people who are adopted is feeling out of place. I think that's probably a pretty common experience. But when you add feeling out of place to knowing that you don't originate, can't see it here. Something else that kind of ties into this is, there's a lot of discussion about black children who are adopted by white parents or biracial children who are adopted by white parents. But I actually had a unique experience of being a biracial person who was adopted by a black family. And honestly, I hesitate sometimes to talk about it because my experience often is downplayed, like it hurts any less. But, I got a lot of backlash from my peer group in my family, about my complexion, about my hair texture. And I realized as I got older, what that comes from, and that's a them problem. But when I was growing up, it really bothered me because I'm like, shit, I didn't ask to be like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't ask to be born this way. I didn't ask to be adopted into this family, and it was like, I felt like no matter what I did, you know what I'm saying, I could never fit in, you know. I did feel the most comfortable with the family that was in Louisiana because, again, I didn't get questioned as much, you know. I could pass for Creole easily, and, you know, they have more, you know, more of the Creole type of appearance, the family that lived in Louisiana. And so I felt more comfortable with them, but and they also treated me a little different, you know. Um, but yeah, so there's that part that ties into that experience of also having a father who completely hates one of the races that I'm mixed with. So, you know, growing up, I had a lot of internalized hate, you know, towards myself because of that. And I tend to internalize, well, I've gotten better. I've grown out of it. But I used to really internalize people's actions towards me and how they treated me. You know, more so now I understand it's a them problem. But at that age, of course, I internalized the things that were said and done to me because I was a kid and I was trying to survive. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, there was that experience as well. And I probably have more things I can say about the way I was treated simply because of how I look. Um, but you know, not that wasn't the purpose of this video, so I'm not gonna go too deep off into that. Another one of the things I experienced knowing at such a young age that I was adopted was a constant yearning for my biological mother. Now, I imagine that people probably go through that no matter what, um, but they might not necessarily be able to put a finger on what that yearning was. Whereas, because I knew that I was adopted, I had a early awareness of what that yearning was, you know, and I would fantasize about my mom coming to get me. You know, I would I would make up scenarios in my head of how I would go about being living back with her, and so you know I idealized being back with my biological mother a lot more than I think I probably would have had I learned later in life. And I think one of the biggest benefits to knowing at such a young age is that it was no surprise to me, even though I went through a lot of other things that may not have been so great. Knowing at such a young age, it wasn't a shock to me. It wasn't like something that, um, you know, I learned on a whim when I'm 30 or 40 years old. So I think that was a good thing. And also, um, all of that fantasizing about meeting my biological mother ended up coming to fruition. And I met her when I was 22, and she's still in my life to this day. So, hey, I'm going to post some more videos. Ask questions, you know, do. Follow, like, all the stuff, you know.